Hi, I'm Lis Wiehl. I'm still Lis Wiehl. I'm still with you here today. And now we're going back to South Carolina in the Moore case. And we have Jacob Melton. Now, he's a 19-year-old in South Carolina, and he's a friend of the Moores, okay? He's a friend of the defendant in this case. Let's go. All right. Okay. They're having a sidebar. So, look, we're going to go to Matthew. Now, it's Mangino, right? Matthew Mangino? I got you. Mangino. Okay, I blew it for the first time. Sorry. Mangino, and you're coming to us from Western Pennsylvania. Hi, Matt.
Hello.
Great to have you on the program. Oh, you look so great. There's books in back of you. You look so studious. Wow. I'm in the Law&Crime, network. So I mean, I got great stuff too. But you got books. You look really good. So on a serious note, so we've got Jacob Melton. So he is a friend of the Moores, and I think he's going to testify about some pretty interesting things. Testify about their comings and goings, obviously, things about inside their house, about their security system. Ooh la 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 la. You know what I mean?
Yeah, well, it'll be interesting to see, where this evidence brings us in this case. I mean, right now, the prosecution, they have a circumstantial evidence case. Not that there's anything wrong with that.
No, there's not. Please.
Those are tough cases to prove. And this looks to be a particularly tough case.
Yeah.
They're trying to connect all the dots and build their case, piece by piece. So it'll be interesting to see where this testimony leads us in terms of the prosecution's case.
Now, you said something interesting, and I'm just going to have to just check it here and talk to our viewers here for a minute. You said circumstantial, and, I'm kind of looking, I'm a former prosecutor, so all of my cases were based on circumstantial. I never had a direct evidence case. But you said this is a particularly difficult circumstantial evidence case. Whoa, circle the horses there. Why is this a particularly difficult circumstantial evidence case?
Well, when you look at it as circumstantial evidence case, in this case is a prime example of that. You don't have what you typically, what jurors typically expect to find, and that is, some eyewitness, some physical evidence, some DNA, some fiber sample, things that give some substance to a case, and the jurors, whether it's because of the CSI factor or whatever.
CSI factor. Explain that again. CSI, slow down. Again, circle the horses. Slow down. CSI factor, what is that?
Well, the CSI factor is that people watch television, particularly CSI and all the other detective shows that are on, and they expect to see what we typically see in these dramas, and that is, some fantastic analysis of a piece of evidence or some DNA analysis. So they expect this.
Do we expect DNA in every shoplifting case? Come on, be honest.
Oh, there's no question. And that puts a greater burden on the prosecution to present a case in a way that jurors expect to see it.
Right. And so they don't have much of that here. But I'm telling you, if this neighbor, now I don't know, because we don't know what's going on. Look, there's a lot of stuff going on right now, and some stuff could be thrown out. But if this neighbor was inside and around and knew a lot about the Moores coming and going, and I'm not talking about hearsay. I'm not talking about what he overheard them say, but I'm talking about what he saw them do and purchase and things like that. That could really step up the prosecution's case, in circumstantial evidence.
It could provide some meat. I mean, right now we're kind of just looking at the bone. This could put some meat on the bone for the prosecution, and that's what they need right now.
Right. Well, yeah, and you got to think. I mean, you got to assume that these are smart prosecutors, and it's a smart office. And there's a smart head in the office, and they're not going to want to go with this case unless there's got some meat on this circumstantial evidence case. So you got to think that Jacob Melton and some of these other witnesses that are coming on board here are going to provide that. Let's see if Mr. Melton, this 19-year-old, is providing some of that meat for the bones there. Let's see. Interesting testimony. Now, everyone, remember, This youth, Jacob, is 19 years old now. Heather disappeared in 2013, and that was Jacob's last time that he was at the Moore's house. So he's talking about what he remembers back in 2013. So he would have been, what, 14, 15 years old. So still certainly able to remember things. And this was, he was best friends or good friends with one of the Moore's sons. So it's not that he was, couldn't remember, but he is still fairly young, right, Matthew? So remember that in your analysis of what's going on. He remembers seeing what?
In his memory was quite impressive. Considering that it was 5 years ago and he was 14 years old at the time.
Yeah, it's I have a couple kids and I'm thinking that's really pretty impressive. But what sticks with me is he remembers the screen, and I was writing, the 4 squares of the screen, which makes sense because kids, and computers, right? They're going to remember the 4 screens and then very particularize what those screens were looking at. He's saying, oh yeah, it was looking at Heather, then he had the name for it. I think it was, I wrote it down, but it was Heather's mother's house. He was looking at that. So he was very particularized about what he saw there, and I think very believable, right, Matthew?
Well, as I said, it was impressive, and it appeared to me that you showed him a number of photographs to show just how good his recollection was, and the detail that he got into in some of the photographs, even of other rooms other than the computer room. But ultimately, the focus of this may be the computer monitor.
Right, because the computer monitors are what looking at what happened that day and what the computer monitors were able to capture that day, or what was erased, to show that consciousness of guilt by taking things off of the computer. It could be that too. We just don't know enough, but we do know we have this youth that's saying, look, there was this computer, it had the security, it had the four screens, I remember that. And the other thing with him is that there's no reason for him to lie, right? I mean, he doesn't get anything out of it. There's nothing in it for him to be sitting around the stand at the age of 19 telling us a lie about something like this. So,
right. I mean, we're jurors are always interested in what a disinterested witness has to say. Someone who has nothing to gain, someone who has no motive to testify one way or another in a particular case. So that makes his testimony even more compelling. And as we said, his memory seems vivid, but ultimately we have to see where this they've laid a groundwork. He remembers. Right. He remembers vividly. Where's it going to lead us? Right.
Exactly. As we were talking about a little before, now we have we've got the bones, and we're now trying to put a little bit of meat on those bones. Is Jacob at age 19 with his groundwork doing it, starting now to be able to put that meat on the bones? We shall see. But first, we have to go to a break, and we will be right back after the break. Very interesting, Matthew, because if this kid, Jacob, who was, by the way, now they did talk about his age right at this point in cross-examination, he's 14, 15 years old. They make sure to bring that out. If you knew that they were, suspected of kidnapping, even murder, why would you go back to their house after knowing that? And your mother knew that you were going back to their house. Aha! The plot thickens, Matthew. What do you think about that? That's kind of what's coming out in cross-examination here. That's what they're trying to get to.
Well, I mean, the thing I think that's interesting is, as we spoke a moment ago, his testimony was so vivid, almost too good. And we find on cross-examination that maybe his recollection isn't as good as he thought it was. And that's been pointed out. And so, what is the purpose of this testimony other than to establish that they had video cameras, they had, surveillance cameras, and the defense is trying to say, well, is it possible that these cameras were put in after, December 18th? And he was pretty emphatic, no. So the point seems to be that, they had video surveillance equipment prior to this alleged kidnapping.
Right, and he really pushed back with the defense lawyer. I mean, seems like, honestly seems like a nice kid, nice young man. He's 19 years old, nice young man. But when the defense lawyer asked, look at my notes here, could it have been a different date? He said no, and It was a little bit of a flash. And don't mess with me on this one. And I don't think that was just because he was prepared. I think it was a little bit of a flash of, no, I'm telling you, this is my recollection, and I'm sticking with it.
Yeah, he wasn't equivocal about that. I mean, when he was asked, could this video camera have been put in 3 days after the alleged kidnapping, and he was emphatic, no, it was not. And so, that's important, because that's what the defense, the prosecution is trying to prove, that, hey, these video surveillance cameras existed prior to the alleged kidnapping, prior to December 18th.
Exactly. That's very, very critical, and especially, as we've talked about, in a circumstantial evidence case where they're really trying to build this brick by brick. They need the bricks, they need the mortar to piece it together. We'll have more on the other side of this break. Stay with us. Oh, this Jacob Melton, Matthew, this 19-year-old in South Carolina who was in the home of the Moores, a friend of the boys, just taking off the stand, a childhood friend of one of the sons there of the Moores, and in the home in 2013, it made a fascinating witness, both on direct and cross-examination, a long cross-examination. But what came out there, Matthew, as we were listening to the cross-examination, is that the husband, who's not on this trial, we'll tell you more about the other trial, and some of you, probably already know about that one. He got a tattoo of Tammy, the defendant here. Why? We'll go to motive, defendant, because Tammy sensibly said, "Hey, husband, you've been cheating on me. I know about it. You have to put a tattoo of me on your body." Jacob sees that tattoo, right? So that puts a timeline on that tattoo at the same time that he sees those computers, because Jacob is out there, as he just testified, going to jobs with Mr. Moore, goes to 6 or 7 jobs with Mr. Moore. Tammy's gone into about one of those jobs with him. He sees the tattoo, he sees the computer, he sees all of this surveillance. He gets it, that makes it so the timeline that Jacob is talking about is correct. Goes to motive, goes to time, goes to saying Jacob is at the right time. He's telling the truth. Matthew, what do you make of that?
Right. It's interesting. Tammy wanted to put her brand on her husband. She knows he's having an affair. She's upset about that, and she says, "Well, this is how we're going to deal with it. You're going to put my name on your body." And in fact, what that does is give the prosecution a timeline.
Yes.
So now they know that this tattoo came, before, Heather's disappearance, and ultimately the monitors were there at the same time the tattoo was. So we can put that time frame of when these monitors were actually being used at the Moore's residence. Exactly.
And I think that now starts to give something for the jurors to, as we were talking about meat, to chew on, which we'll chew on some more after we come back from this break. Stay with us. Matthew Mangino, I know you're in Western Pennsylvania. What are your final wrap-up thoughts for today before we have to wrap up this hour of Law and Crime and the Moore case?
Well, the prosecution's trying to put together their circumstantial case bit by bit. And sometimes you have to make a big thing out of little things just to keep the jury's attention, just to show them that this is a methodical process and we're putting this together piece by piece like a puzzle. Sometimes, these witnesses, you might not have spent as much time on them if you had, DNA evidence or fingerprints or an eyewitness. So you got to build that case methodically and show the jury how this whole thing fits together.
All right. Well, that's what they're trying to do. I'm not sure whether they're doing it all well. So well. Jacob Melton today, the 19-year-old from South Carolina, did a fairly good job. Matthew, thank you so much for being with us from Western Pennsylvania. We'll pick up more on this tomorrow on the Moore case in South Carolina. It's been great to have you with me today, along with my other guests from Houston. And we now have a wonderful half-hour show with you today. So I'm looking forward for you to watch that with us. So with you tomorrow afternoon. Stay with us for Law and Crime. I'm Lis Wiehl signing off.